was also part of the Prime Minister's high-level committee, which is popularly known as Sacha Committee in 2006. And today he's going to speak on the issue of minoritism or minority rights, Sacha Committee, Muslims, and the question of social justice. I welcome Dr. Fazil.
I take my cue from Yogendra ji and particularly his emphasis on truth. और शायद हम लोग सभी उसी ट्रूथ की तलाश में हैं. अभी भी हम पोस्ट ट्रूथ एरा में जाने को तैयार नहीं हैं. और ट्रूथ की सर्च अगर आप देखें तो ट्रूथ के सर्च जस्टिस के साथ आई थिंक देयर इज़ अ वेरी क्लोज रिलेशनशिप. When Jyotiba Phule formed his organization, उसका नाम उन्होंने सत्य शोधक समाज रखा है कि सच की तलाश करने वाला है organization. So truth was such, it was an important element for justice. और इसी truth की तलाश में I think हमारे हिंदुस्तान से और कई दुनिया के अलग अलग जगहों से philosophers, thinkers, संत महात्मा लगे रहे हैं. What we've seen is that since the context is social justice, let us also understand that justice in relation to truth, and so long as we understand truth, we also have to understand that justice takes various forms. There is, however, a universal quest for justice. Justice के ends universal हो सकते हैं, पर instruments ज़रूरी नहीं है कि uniform. We have to make a distinction between universality and uniformity. तो जस्टिस के एंड बराबरी, नाइंसाफ़ी के खिलाफ, जस्टिस के एंड डिग्निटी, but at the same time the instruments to reach those ends could differ. They would differ depending on the social formation, depending on historical context. They will depend on the kind of politics and the preparedness or the political preparedness to accept certain forms of justice. Now, for example, if we had to take a universal kind of a notion of justice without taking into account the different ways in which societies are formed, the different characters of the society and societies, someone like Ambedkar, someone like Phule, had they been born in Europe at the time when probably Marx or other thinkers were thinking about the society, the changing society, etc. Caste, status group, diversity, hierarchy, ये सारी चीज़ें उनके theorization के शायद part नहीं होती. And vice versa is also true. That if Marx were to be born in India, in a society which is so diverse, there's some people talk about celebration of diversity, but let us also understand that there is a hierarchy within this diversity. So while we talk about celebration of diversity, but we have to also erase this hierarchy which exists. So if in a unicultural society as Germany or many European states were, the question of minorities, the question of say caste groups, etc., wouldn't be such important elements for a theorization of justice. But that could not have been true in India. See, while I am saying this, I am aware that Marx also on the Jewish question, some people might point it out. So beforehand, I am preempting that to say that there is in a particular context, he refers to the rights of the minorities, the Jews' rights, the religious rights as their constitutional right, as not necessarily just a theological right, but part of the, entire package of, right to freedom, right to expression, etc. So, as I'm arguing that justice is, response to the social context, it also, the ideas of justice might differ from time to time in a same society, depending on the political preparedness to understand new kinds of, or new kinds of social groups claiming justice. For example, अगर आप बैकवर्ड क्लास मूवमेंट और सोशल जस्टिस की हिस्ट्री हिंदुस्तान में देखें तो पोस्ट 1947 जो ओबीसी की बात अभी थोड़ी देर पहले हो रही थी, ओबीसी को कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में डिफाइन नहीं किया गया, इट हैज़ बीन लेफ्ट ओपन टू इंटरप्रिटेशन, और यह कहा गया कि ओबीसी socially and educationally backward classes, it will be left to a commission duly instituted, which will decide upon what will be the parameters of backwardness, etc. And therefore, in 1951, 52, I think 55, they submitted the report, Kaka Kalelkar Commission. Or the first backward classes commission was instituted. And this first backward classes commission, while most of the members of the commission had come to accept that caste was the basis of, on which units of backwardness were to be identified, the commission, Kaka Kalelkar Commission went on to suggest, while including a large number of caste groups amongst backwards, it also went on to suggest that there should be a bifurcation within the OBC amongst those who are advanced and those who are most backward, so that the internal competition and then encroachment by certain dominant castes over others could be avoided. ये सारे फॉर्मूले के बावजूद the commission's chairperson himself, Kaka Kalelkar, differed from the report. And in the preface he wrote that this cannot be accepted because caste would create, vociferous tendencies, a term which was used very frequently those days in a young, newly born India, was vociferous tendencies. So, इस तरह की कुछ vociferous tendencies it would create, that it is a primordial, we will rather, reinforce caste, and including the Prime Minister also differed from it. He sent an advisory to the state governments while rejecting the report altogether, saying that, well, it is advised that economic basis for backwardness should be identified and not necessarily caste. The Kaka Kalelkar Commission was rejected. State governments went on to institute their own commission to identify backward classes. And later on, when the Janata Party government was formed, we are all aware that the Mandal Commission came into being, which was implemented in the 1990s, and again the VP Singh government came into. Today, I do not think that there is any political formation in India which would, no matter from what kind of a theory of justice would it subscribe to, would be prepared to reject the Mandal Commission. In fact, the Mandal Commission is no different. The only difference between the Mandal Commission and probably the Kaka Kalelkar Commission is that the Mandal Commission does not bifurcate the backward class category, which the Kalelkar Commission had done. Otherwise, the unit of backwardness is cast again. But the same political parties which were there then, who had come together to reject Kaka Kalelkar Commission altogether, accept. So therefore, the idea of justice can differ both in terms of time as well as space. I'm asked to speak on the Sachar committee, and well, in the same continuum, when we see that there are groups discriminated on the basis of caste in India, on the basis of gender, of course, which is now widely organized, internationally and recognized. Why couldn't, in a country which, such as India, which has faced immense violence on the basis of religious identity, in fact, if we read Paul Brass would say that these are anti-minority pogroms. All these, communal riots which have taken place in pre- and post-independent India. So in such a situation, why couldn't the religious identity also be the basis of, discrimination or the basis of marginalization?
Hello.
However, the interesting thing, which twist or change in approach which comes with the Sachar committee is, and this is from where I bring the title of this talk, that is minorityism or minority rights. So far as I understand, the minority question in India was, particularly since post 1947, Hello? So particularly since 1947, is through an instrument or a lens or whatever you say, what I would call it as minorityism. Minorityism is where, as different from minority rights, is when you reduce the minority communities simply as cultural beings who have only cultural needs, cultural identity, etc., without attending to their material deprivations or their, power differentials, etc., which they suffer from. If you look at the constitution-making process itself and compare the draft constitution with what the final constitution came into existence, while the draft constitution had detailed provisions for various different kinds of minorities, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes were included within the rubric of minority. So, and extensive safeguards were provided. In fact, one of the, Dr. Ambedkar's own formula for the resolution of the communal problem, which he says, is what he calls is that to ensure, and this was a formula which he offered, that would take into account the concerns of the minorities who were at that time, particularly the Muslims demanding for Pakistan, arguing that in post-colonial India would be a Hindu majoritarian state, and in such a situation minority needed to be protected, safeguarded, etc. And what we have, therefore Ambedkar's idea was that how the communal majority should not become a permanent majority. And hence he had extensive suggestions arguing that within, say, the executive, different communities should be represented, and decisions should be on the basis of on the basis of unanimous decisions without taking majority decisions, etc. There was a provision for a minority superintendent who would be having equal status as that of the Auditor General of India, whose reports would be, annual reports would be presented in the Parliament, and that would be checked, sort of series of checks and balances to ensure that there was no, communal bias in the functioning of the government, and to ensure that the concerns which the minority communities were expressing were addressed. However, this was not to happen in the new constitution which came into being. Such suggestions of Ambedkar and others was not taken into account at all. In fact, whatever provisions were there were left out. Minorities now were reduced to what they had as Article 29 and 30, which was to right to establish their own educational institutions to preserve their own cultural distinctiveness. So this is what I say is that how the minority communities are being seen through this prism of minorityism, and successive successive governments, no matter which political orientation they belong to, are more or less, adopted this as a policy to address the minority problem, which would mean that when it comes to education, they would address it through madrasas. So someone would say that if we modernize the madrasas, the Muslim educational problem will be solved. This would also mean that you will see Muslims or minorities as a homogeneous being. And therefore, you would have such provisions as Presidential Order of 1950, which says that the scheduled caste reservation would be extended only to those who are untouchables among the Hindus, and not necessarily those who convert out of Hinduism into other religions. In fact, if we follow the court orders, and what the court order suggests, that if court sanctions, the honorable courts actually sanction some form of ghar wapsi, when it suggests that you can go out of you lose your caste status and SC, scheduled caste benefits, etc., when you convert out of, say, Hinduism, but you revive it, your caste status gets revived, even if after 2 or 3 generations you come back to Hinduism. So there is a sort of a incentive being provided. These kinds of, policies, as I would argue, is within the prism of minorityism, but such a committee seemed to be a recognition of the fact that there are long sustained, for historical reasons as well as various kinds of economic decisions, etc., that the minorities, particularly the certain minority groups, were suffering from material deprivation as well. And therefore, the such a committee was constituted with a specific agenda of, investigate the educational, income deprivation, social deprivation, etc., amongst the Muslims. And to my understanding, that this such a committee did succeed to a certain extent to leave aside the question of identity, the question of security even, although it argued that the identity, security and equity are the 3 different dimensions of a Muslim's life in India. But however, or any minority's life, but however, the committee would be concentrating on the question of material deprivation, which is equity. And I think it did succeed in exploring various myths. One of the biggest myths which it was able to explode, of course, was, and since then we have rarely heard about that slogan, which is called minority appeasement. I don't think now it is any longer part of the right's discourse, which was very much being used all through the late 80s and early 90s, was the question of minority appeasement, and how the minority is being appeased in this country. They are being pampered here, they are getting all the doles, and without, whereas the majority were suffering. So it tried to, a classic, hostility to be created against the minority so as to consolidate the Hindu vote. This seemed to have been thoroughly, at least demolished, because it's such a committee which drew its strength and argument from data which was provided largely by the state governments themselves, showed that across various variables of development, whether we say education, income levels, public employment, even bank credits and other things, it seemed that when we compare it on a plane, compared to all other communities, the Muslims were definitely lagging behind. When I say this, I am aware that the Muslim question in India differs from place to place. it is most acute in the east and the northern states, and less so in the southern Indian states. It also follows a pattern. The states which are relatively more developed, where economic and human development indicators are much better, this Muslims also seem to perform much better compared to their co-religionists in other parts or poorer parts of India. The second thing which was part of the right-wing whole construction of a Muslim identity was more or less around the question of gender, for instance. The argument that Muslim women particularly were the most oppressed, and therefore the community remained extremely backward. But as we saw that the demographic indicators, etc., suggested that there was definitely a higher sex ratio compared to that amongst the national average. There was not only that, the child sex ratio showed a further increasing trend, which only showed that otherwise, while in the national average, it suggested that there was a declining sex ratio. In the case of the Muslims and some other minority communities, including the Christians as well, that it was rather improving. Similarly, when it came to maternal, mortality, when it came to child mortality and other things, which also suggested that, these are indicators about the health of the women within the household, and it showed that the Muslim women had reported far lesser maternal mortality than compared to the national average. When it came to the question of, again, a lot of myth also has been created around the question of fertility, that Muslims tend to, be more fertile, that Muslim women produce more children, etc. And our Prime Minister also, when he was the Chief Minister, we all are aware that he provided us a strange, political arithmetic when he said, "Hum panch, hamare 25." He thinks that the women come from outside of this world. It is, so these kind of slogans. Recently, someone else said that they tend to produce 40 children, and therefore, recently the RSS Pramukh also, impressed by these figures probably, he also, asked his Hindu brethren that you should also go ahead and produce more and more, because that was the need of the hour. But as it showed, the data as it showed, that there was there was a little bit higher fertility amongst Muslims, but the rate of decline amongst the Muslims was faster than the rate of decline of any other national, which only showed that over a period of time it will come to exactly the same or even lower if the trend continued. So there was no trend of the way in which all this thing was being reported. Similarly, very recently we had this whole big, hue and cry, and a lot of editorials, even some of the feminists got very agitated and excited. And this was about the triple talaq. Well, it is an issue within the Muslim law. There is a problem. All civil, personal laws tend to be gender unjust. But however, how big is it an issue that it needed immediate attention is to be really, questioned. It needs to be questioned because when we see the figures of, say, polygamy, or even, say, divorce rate, the divorce rate seems to be the same for both Muslims as well as other communities, the national average, almost the same. And when it comes to polygamy, incidence of polygamy, the incidence of polygamy reported from amongst the Muslims, the last count was in 1961, seemed to be much lesser for Muslims than the others. So therefore, the way in which certain kind of stereotypes are formed, certain kind of stigmatization takes place, and the communities therefore, mobilization and counter-mobilization take place around those issues, I think to that extent, such a committee did have a very, very important role to play. Further, such a committee also tried to explore that myth of Muslims being a homogeneous community. It argued that the Muslim community, like any other community in India, caste being one of the important factors of social formation in this country, it also affects the Muslims to the same extent, more or less, as it does the other communities. It identified, although sociologists and anthropologists had been reporting it for long, but probably for the first time, while the Mandal Commission and the Karelkar Commission had recognized Muslim backward castes, but this category of arzals, it is argued that broadly three kinds of status groups can be formed amongst the Muslims. The upper caste, who are the ashrafs, the middle caste, who are largely occupational groups, they are the ajlafs, and the last one, which was reported in the colonial census and other places but never found recognition within the government documents, was something which first time came to be recognized in the such a committee. This is the arzals, or the wretched of the earth. These are the converts from the untouchable castes who continue to practice similar kind of professions, and as a result of which face similar kind of stigmatization both within the Muslim society as well as without the Muslim society. And therefore, this is particular category of those people who would qualify to be the scheduled caste, as the case is being fought for the Dalit Christian. Is something somewhat similar is the case here. This kind of an argument, which does, with this kind of a data and figure and the knowledge which such a committee produced, has also, it drew from politics, further it also strengthened a new kind of politics of justice. And this new kind of politics of justice, you will find two different kinds of discourses came to post-Satya have become very strong amongst Muslims. Their existence was there in the past as well, but post-Satya there is a further kind of a mobilization, and these two different is one based on which argues that entire Muslims minus this creamy layer could be taken and included amongst the OBC, because as such a committee data showed, that Muslims actually shows that Muslims as an entirety, comparatively are below the OBCs. So the entire Muslim community minus this, creamy layer could be included amongst the OBCs, or this, and in contrast to this, or in contestation with this, there's a rise of the OBC politics amongst Muslims, which got a new kind of energy, which started arguing that this kind of a, formula, wherein the entire Muslims are to be included amongst the OBCs, would lead to, a situation in which the Muslim upper caste would come to appropriate everything in the name of Muslim identity. And hence, we see a new quest for social justice amongst the Muslim OBCs as well as the Muslim Dalits following such. What we have seen over a period of time, that while such a committee report, I understand, did make a departure from minorityism and try to address the material deprivation, but post such the implementation of the such a committee report, more or less, we find reversal to the idea of minorityism again. Again, there has been talk about, despite the such a committee figures showed that it was not such a committee's own figure, it cited two different surveys, one by NCAER and the other by NCRT, to show that how all this talk about madrasas and all this talk about religious education, which was not in tune with the modern times. But the fact of the matter was that only 3 to 4% of the Muslim children in the school-going age were going to the madrasas, and that the chances of a Muslim student opting for madrasas was more in those places where there were a dearth of schools. So wherever you open more schools, particularly government schools with less fee, etc., and other things, there's a lesser possibility of Muslims necessarily opting for madrasas. So, however, post such again we've seen that whatever government effort was, it was. Why does the government continue to do that? Probably it feels that it is politically it has more political capital. when it works through this age-old practices rather than, you know, opening schools which are open for every community, rather than, you know, offering kinds of schemes which are open to everyone and also addresses the concerns of the Muslims. But such kinds of, you know, minority-centric policies might, you know, or those which attend to only the cultural needs of the minorities might be able to, you know, mobilize Muslim, and particularly its leadership. The leadership which has been cultivated over a period of time to the secular state even is largely a leadership which is which draws its training, its location, etc. Within the domain of religion. They mostly of the, even yesterday I was looking at a photograph which Prime Minister Modi has just come with great pride. It's been brought out, in which various, you know, religious preachers from Sajjada Nasheens of Dargahs, some people who are running madrasas, some, all of them running All India Tanzim or All India organization, even if those organizations are of 2 or 3 people and other things. But they definitely have long beard and a cap and other things. They represent what the state or others would like a typical Muslim to look like. They are perfect, offer perfect photo opportunity. And the Prime Minister, with around 20 or 25 of them, whose names you've never heard, probably, and has photographed himself. These all people went. Interestingly, they congratulated the Prime Minister for ensuring that Saudi Arabia increases the quota of Hajj pilgrims. This is a decision by the Saudi Arabia government, which time to time, you know, reassesses it, since so as to regulate the number of people who would be going to the. It has to make arrangements. So time to time it makes, depending on the number of, you know, applications, the population, etc., that time to time accesses and fixes a quota. However, the Modi ji, the Prime Minister, the Superman, has been, you know, congratulated for this. The whole horde of these people went there. Apart from that, they also congratulated the Prime Minister. I'm sorry for the slip of the Prime Minister. They congratulated the Prime Minister. They congratulated the Prime Minister for a wonderful step, a bold step of denotification, because they felt that the denotification had started showing its result. It had, you know, definitely improved the conditions of the poor and particularly the minorities. This is what the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister gave 2 hours to them. Think about, you know, the Indian Prime Minister, who seems to be extremely busy, spent 2 hours to these people who were saying that, you know, demonetization has already, they have started feeling it, the impact of it, and that impact was definitely very positive. So this is a kind of politics which has been cultivated, and these are the cultural spokesmen through which have emerged as interlocutors through which the state, even today it is, you know, it makes no difference in this context, that the state continues to, you know, to deal or engage with the Muslim question, irrespective of the fact that what, you know, the institution, the Sajjad Committee suggested, or despite this departure, we see a reversal coming back to what it was earlier. Therefore, the quest for social justice now, for the Muslims, is also a, you know, extremely cautious thing to do. While, well, I have been arguing that Muslims cannot be different from or apart from the general questions of social justice which have emerged in this country. They have to be part and parcel of it. They have to be part and parcel of every other political process in this country. And therefore, there is a possibility that within the existing scheme of social justice, which is the question of OBCs, that if there is a possibility that the OBC category is bifurcated, then a large number of backward Muslims would find place amongst the most backward category and will be able to benefit, and thus their representation in public employment, in educational institutions would improve. However, as we see that there is not much honesty in terms of implementation, and therefore situations remain where they were in the, say, 20 years back, 30 years back. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll just take 2 questions since you have already asked, so I'm just looking for new faces. First there and then. Yeah. Can you come here? Come here now.
सर अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर, मेरा नाम मोहम्मद यूसुफ है और मैं ड्यू से एमए कर रहा हूँ। सर मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि आपने बताया भी कि मदरसा का मॉडर्नाइजेशन पे जो लोग कहते हैं इससे कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता, मुस्लिम वैसे भी नीचे, अगर हम मॉडर्न भी कर देंगे मदरसाज को तो उससे नीचे। सर मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि आपने बताया 3 से 4% मुस्लिम्स आर गोइंग टू मदरसाज। सो सर मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि वो 3 से 4% मुस्लिम मदरसा में जाते हैं लड़के, तो इंडिया में बहुत कम ऐसे मदरसे हैं जहाँ पे मॉडर्नाइजेशन के साथ एजुकेशन या अदर फील्ड में एजुकेशन दी जाती है, पर्टिकुलर रिलीजन की एजुकेशन दी जाती है। सर वहाँ जाने के बाद जब बच्चा निकलता है वहाँ से तो कहीं जाके मस्जिद में इमाम बनता है, वो फिर प्रीच देता है नमाज के बाद, नमाज के पहले। तो सर वो एक्चुअली जब गवर्नमेंट हमारे साथ कर नहीं रही, सच्चर कमेटी की रिकमेंडेशंस लागू नहीं कर रही, तो मुस्लिम्स को ही मेरा स्टैंड अप करना पड़ेगा। और अगर हम मदरसाज को मॉडर्न करते हैं, उनको मॉडर्न करने का मतलब मेरा इन द सेंस कि उनको चारों तरफ की एजुकेशन दी जाए ताकि वो बोल सकें, तो जब वो प्रीचर बनते हैं आगे जाके तो वो लोगों को उत्साहित करेंगे कि आप अपने बच्चों को पढ़ाइए, क्योंकि प्राइमरी में कोई नहीं रोक सकता बच्चे को पढ़ाने भेजने से। तो वो तो गवर्नमेंट दे रही है, लेकिन मुस्लिम्स के बच्चे प्राइमरी में भी नहीं जा रहे हैं, वो जाके 8 साल में 10 साल में मूंगफली का ठेला लगाते हैं, केला का ठेला लगाते हैं। तो सर मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि इसको कैसे सुधारा जाए? अगर हम मॉडर्न भी नहीं करेंगे जैसा आपने बताया तो फिर कैसे सुधरेगा सर? क्योंकि ज़्यादातर मुस्लिम जो पॉपुलेशन है अनएजुकेटेड है, तो वो प्रीचर पे ही डिपेंड करती है, उन्हीं की बात को बहुत अच्छे से मानती है और सुनती है, क्योंकि एक रिलीजियस प्रीचर है, दैट्स वाई वो उनको फॉलो करते हैं।
सर मदरसे की जो स्कीम की बात कर रहे हैं इसमें सर ये होना चाहिए, सोशल जस्टिस का ये पॉइंट है, लेकिन जो लोग इसको अपोज करते हैं उनका पॉइंट ये है कि ऑटोनॉमी का क्या होगा, क्योंकि अभी तक 2 तरह के मदरसे चलते हैं, एक बोर्ड का मदरसा है, एक प्राइवेट मदरसा है। तो बोर्ड की जो हालत है उसको देख करके वो अपोज करते हैं कि वहाँ पढ़ाई कुछ नहीं होती, सिर्फ डिग्रियाँ बढ़ती हैं। तो अगर इनको भी अगर आप मॉडर्नाइज करेंगे, गवर्नमेंट के अंडर में लेंगे, तो फिर इनका क्या कंडीशन होगा और इनका ऑटोनॉमी का क्या सवाल होगा?
2 क्वेश्चन मदरसों से थे, तो एनी अदर क्वेश्चन रिलेटेड टू मदरसा? I cited 2 survey reports, NCAER and the NCERT, to suggest that what has been reported by them that जो स्कूल गोइंग एज के बच्चे हैं उनमें से मुस्लिम बच्चे हैं स्कूल गोइंग एज, ठीक है, 6 से 14, उनमें से सिर्फ 3 से 4%, और अलग अलग स्टेट में वैरी कर सकता है, अलग अलग शहरों में बदल सकता है, लेकिन नेशनल एवरेज यही निकलता है 3 से 4% वो मदरसा एजुकेशन लेते हैं। अब कुछ लोगों को इस फिगर से प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है, लेकिन देखिए मदरसे कई तरह के हैं, कुछ मकतब भी हैं, कुछ दारुल उलूम भी हैं जहाँ हॉस्टल भी होता है, हायर डिग्री भी मिलती है, मकतब है जहाँ पे प्राइमरी स्कूल के लेवल के एजुकेशन दिए जाते हैं। बहुत सारे बच्चे ऐसे भी हैं जो स्कूल भी जाते हैं और रिलीजियस इंस्ट्रक्शन के लिए मकतब भी जाते हैं, और वो भी काउंट हो जाते हैं मकतब जाने वालों में। नाउ जो हम लोगों ने देखा सचर कमेटी के दौरान के एरियाज इन विच देयर इज स्कूल विद इन द विसिनिटी ऑफ 2 किलोमीटर, इसका एक प्रोविजन है कि प्राइमरी स्कूल 2 किलोमीटर के अंदर होना चाहिए। तो जो मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन है 25 से 30% जहाँ पर, और वहाँ पे अगर स्कूल करीब में है तो उन स्कूलों में वहाँ पे मदरसा जाने वाले बच्चों की तादाद कम हो जाती है। और उसकी वजह the conclusion which you come to is that if there is a provision for modern education, Muslims like any other, I don't see Muslims as any way different from any other, human being. Many people would like to see Muslims in terms of various kinds of, premonitions or presumptions, लेकिन कुछ अलग नहीं है, उनके मोरलेस नीड्स वही हैं जो दूसरों के हैं। तो इस मॉडर्न एजुकेशन के स्कूल होंगे तो वहाँ प्रेफर करेंगे ज़्यादा जाना कंपेयर टू द मदरसा। Even if the family would or the parents would like to have their wards to have religious education as well, there is a provision कि आप मॉडर्न स्कूल में जा करके साथ साथ आप मकतब में भी जा सकते हैं, और ऐसे बहुत लोग करते हैं, बहुत लोगों के घरों में मौलवी आते हैं। When it comes to the question of modernization of particularly the state-driven modernization process, the मदरसा modernization scheme सबसे पहले वाजपेयी गवर्नमेंट के टाइम में आई थी, and I have evaluated it particularly in छत्तीसगढ़ और मध्य प्रदेश, जहाँ हमने बहुत ट्रैवल किया, 100 करीब मदरसों में गए और वहाँ करके सिलेबस देखा हमने, वहाँ पे स्कीम किस तरह से इम्प्लीमेंट हो रही है। तो उसमें प्रोविजन है कि एक साइंस टीचर अपॉइंट किया जाएगा गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से, और कुछ पैसे वो कंप्यूटर लैब बनाने के लिए देते हैं, 20-25 हज़ार वन टाइम ग्रांट, 20-25 हज़ार पर मदरसा। और अगर वो टीचर ग्रेजुएट है तो उसकी तनख्वाह है 8,000 रुपये, और अगर वो ग्रेजुएट नहीं है तो 6 से 8 हज़ार के बीच में। और ये ग्रांट भी मंथली नहीं पहुंचता, टाइम पे नहीं पहुंचता, इस वजह से ज़्यादातर लोगों को सैलरी टाइम में नहीं मिलती। इस वजह से मदरसा फंक्शनरीज ने बताया है कि भाई जो लोग मदरसा जो अच्छे कैंडिडेट हैं, जो पढ़ाने में इंटरेस्टेड थे, उनको हम रख नहीं पाते, क्योंकि इस कम तनख्वाह में, और वो भी तनख्वाह इतनी डिलेड हो, उसमें किसको हम रख सकते। द इंटायर आइडिया दिस लंबी चौड़ी बात मदरसा मॉडर्नाइजेशन वगैरह पे हुई, लेकिन अल्टीमेटली जो अलोकेशन है वो बहुत कम है, which shows that the seriousness of the government was not towards that, but at the same time it was flagging it as a big intervention which it was doing. Similarly, जो सिलेबस वगैरह की मॉडर्नाइजेशन की बात थी, तो हमने देखा कि खास के छत्तीसगढ़ और मध्य प्रदेश दोनों सरकार, बीजेपी की सरकार है, वहाँ पे मदरसा में जो कोर्सेज चल रहे थे वो पार्टली कोर्स था जो रिलीजियस इंस्ट्रक्शन का था, और पार्टली जो था वो जो मॉडर्न सब्जेक्ट्स हैं वो, और उसमें पढ़ाया जा रहा था वैदिक मैथमेटिक्स, उसमें पढ़ाया जा रहे थे हिस्ट्री की किताब है तो अपनी ही हिस्ट्री अलग तरह की रंगी हुई हिस्ट्री थी, और उसमें सरस्वती वंदना और गीता के सार वगैरह से किताबें शुरू होती थी। If then the madrasa functionaries have an apprehension about such schemes, that apprehension is not इतना गलत नहीं है, therefore they are extremely careful about going along with this scheme probably, because wherever schemes are functioning, either they are not functioning effectively or it is serving some other agenda altogether.
Sorry, we'll have to stop.